Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Paola, and today I have a very special guest, Olivia. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
Oh, I'm honored. I've been dying to talk to you ever since spoiler alert and now all the feels. I'm excited. People at home, I will leave down below links so that you can add the book on Goodreads and so that you can pre-order it, and also to Olivia's website and her newsletter. So Olivia, tell us a little bit about All the Feels.
Well, All the Feels, it comes out on October 26th. It is connected to the book Spoiler Alert that you mentioned that came out last year. Spoiler Alert sort of is set in a world where there is a blockbuster television show sort of based on mythology and the Aeneid, sort of a Game of Thrones-esque TV show, which is not accidental. And and it sort of comes into it in the final season in these first two books, which is going off the rails very quickly. And the male main character in All the Feels is the best friend of Marcus, who was the male main character of Spoiler Alert. And while Marcus is very sort of thoughtful and, pretty guarded as a person, a lot of Spoiler Alert sort of about, the personas you allow to be seen in public to sort of guard your inner self. Alex is not. He is 100% out there. He is huge-hearted, impulsive, generous, incredibly loyal, major pain in the ass, like to a lot of people, and maybe the most fun character I've ever written, and had not written a male main character like him before. And so he is in the last season. He's very unhappy for a variety of reasons. He gets into a bar fight in Spain, which is where they're filming. And there's a sense that he might be spiraling out of control. So the production gives him a minder. And that is something that happens. It happened with Robert Downey Jr., as a matter of fact, I think more than once. And this one, minder, is a cousin of one of the awful showrunners. Her name is Lauren Clegg. And she's taking a break from being a therapist in the ER. And so she takes this work to basically keep him out of trouble until the show finishes airing, which proves harder than she perhaps imagined. And over time, two people who seem to be very different, turns out they have a lot in common, and they bicker a lot. I love this book, and yeah, I can't wait.
I can't wait either. I'm only on chapter 3, but it's delightful. It's delightful. And it's the kind of book that you just put down because you have to do stuff, but you cannot wait to pick back up. So as you mentioned, this is a celebrity romance. So what's something that you like to explore that pertains to fame and love?
I think one thing that really interests me about writing people who are in the public eye is that there's, in some ways, I suspect that part of what I'm doing is also exploring a little bit about what it's like to be a writer, where part of your job is to be in the public eye and to share things about yourself, hopefully in a sincere way. Like I truly believe sort of my social media presence is very much me. It's not a persona I'm putting on, but then you have to sort of evaluate how much of yourself you're willing to allow to be public, which is what Marcus struggles with. And then the struggle, I think, more for Alex is grappling with his responsibilities as a public figure. He's not proud of sort of the messages that the show is sending. So he has to grapple with what are his responsibilities to viewers? What are his responsibilities to the people who depend on him? And sort of how all of those things play into each other.
That's something that I look forward to when I read a celebrity romance. I look forward to like that intersection between having a persona and being your true self, like behind the scenes, or however the writer wishes to explore it. I find it very, very interesting. So what are some tropes that you love writing, and what are some tropes that you love reading?
Now, in general, though, there's a lot of intersection for me for those two things. So, I mean, I love a good friends to lovers. Forced proximity is probably my like number one catnip, and that is probably going to be pretty evident in All the Feels. And there was a time in my life where I could handle more angst. That time has passed. Like often second chance romances can be very difficult for me if there's a lot of bitterness in their past or like a lot of angst. And enemies to lovers, I get very tense when there's a lot of like conflict. And like I don't tend to read a ton of like super alpha, what's so-called alpha holes are not really my thing. And I don't write those. The one thing I will say is that, spoiler alert, includes a trope that I do not actually like reading. I don't like secret keeping necessarily. It makes me very stressed. But then I sat down and wrote it. So there are exceptions.
I mean, fair. Secret keeping is so stressful to read. I'm always like, but like, what if they find out? Like, when are they going to find out? And I get so nervous.
I know. I mean, I will say that it was easier to write it than to read it.
So let's switch the roles. This isn't a synopsis, so I'm not spoiling anything. So if you were in Alex's position as a celebrity and Alex was a writer, what road do you think he would take you on?
I know that my personal story, if Alex were writing that, would include, frankly, a lot more pegging than my personal story includes now, because that's just kind of his thing, when in his own writing. He's also a chaos demon, and so the story would likely be maybe a little less disciplined than the story that I wrote for him. I suspect that he's not much of a plotter. Who knows whether all the threads would end up coming together? Like, there might be questions that never get answered, characters who appear who never appear again. You're like, what happened to that person? But it would be vastly entertaining.
I love that. That was my favorite question. So this is the fill in the blank section. The first book I ever loved was?
I think my first book I ever truly remember just loving was The Witch of Blackbird Pond by Elizabeth George Spear, which is what I have often said before is a romance with training wheels on it.
The first book I bought with my own money was?
I do not know, because I am, as my daughter might say, an old. So I am 44. And when I was growing up, we still had like thriving malls. And in that thriving mall was a Walden Books. So before we would go on trips, they would buy me some books and I would buy some books with any money that I had. And then my mother would hide those books, because if she did not hide those books, they would all be read before the trip started. So I do know that at Scholastic book fairs, I was super into, and this is not going to surprise you at this point, there was a series of like YA books called the Sunfire series. They were all set in pivotal moments in American history, and they were all historical romances for like YA.
My first book idea was?
The first full-on book idea I wrote, and that was my one attempt at pantsing. Like, where I did not sit down and plan it. I had worked for a long time at Colonial Williamsburg, which in costume, sort of as what's called a historical interpreter. And Colonial Williamsburg remains sort of my favorite job, where I felt really a part of a community. Everyone was either like dating, or they slept together, or they were sleeping together, or like they would hang out at night, and like some of them lived because you could rent some of the houses in the area, and they do night work. So like it was socializing and working, and it was all very integrated. And so I wrote a romance based in Colonial Williamsburg. There was a lot to be said about that romance. I think there are some very positive aspects of it, but plotting, what is technically considered a plot, was not one of the aspects that was particularly strong there.
Yeah, pantsing is not a great idea for me either.
If I want something to happen in the book, then I have to figure that out ahead of time, because otherwise it will be banter, boning, and introspection, the novel.
I mean, I would read that. The song that I want to write a book about is?
Again, I'm an old, and I graduated from high school in 1994, so like the height of grunge. I liked a lot of the grunge bands, but the grunge band that I still really listen to this day is Soundgarden. And when I was in college, they came out with a song called Burden in My Hand. In fact, I wrote a book kind of based on this song. It needs major editing. It's like a futuristic Gothic because it's very, I find it very evocative. I don't usually, honestly, I love music. But I don't really do like playlists for my books. My ideas don't come from music generally. But this one, the first line of it is, "Follow me into the desert as thirsty as you are." And it's just really, I find the whole thing just would be a perfect Gothic romance. I wrote the Gothic romance. Obviously, it's not what I usually write. I knew that I needed help with descriptions. And in Gothics, a lot of what's happening is about atmosphere, like making things creepy and mysterious. And you establish that through descriptions mostly. And so I was trying to sort of make it so that I was forced to describe things. I did it in part to sort of become a better writer, hopefully. So I did think it helped.
That's so interesting, though. I love when writers venture into other types of, like, either subgenres or tropes or something like that, just to flex those writing muscles. So if you were a book, what section of the bookstore would you live in?
Whatever section of the bookstore did not require a bra or pants that are not like stretchy. So any section of the bookstore where basically I could be in pajamas, that is where I am.
I mean, yes, because bras are so unnecessary, pants as well. So with that said, tell us about your upcoming project.
So, yep, All That Feels is October 26th. I'm just writing the epilogue for the third and possibly final book in sort of the spoiler alert universe, which is right now at least called Shipwrecked. Two of the characters in that universe are Maria and Peter. Their characters were shipwrecked on an island. And so they're sort of filming separately on their island for most of the time. And the premise is this one goes back to when they first met. So it's not just at the end of the filming. It goes back to when they met. They had a one-night stand that he actually didn't necessarily intend to be a one-night stand. And she just left the next morning. And as happens in romance novels, she goes in for her final auditions for this role on Gods of the Gates. And the person who she has a chemistry audition with is him.
I love one-night stand romances where it's not meant to be like a one-night stand. And then I'm so excited. And people at home, don't forget to check out the description below so that you can pre-order All the Feels and also get, spoiler alert, by the one, the only, the legendary Olivia Dade. Thank you so much, Olivia, for doing this with me. I had a lot of fun chatting with you.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for wanting me to chat with you. And thanks for taking the time to talk about my books with me.
And I hope we can do it again for Shipwrecked. Thank you everyone else for watching, and we will see you in another one. Bye.